The first time Deputy Ron Mercer put his hands on Commander Elena Ward, he thought he was humiliating just another woman who didn't belong in his courtroom. That's what he believed anyway. The room went silent, his hand shot toward her throat, and for about half a second he looked like the biggest man in the building. Then Elena moved, and the next sound anyone heard was his arm popping like a dry branch and his face hitting the counsel table. Yeah, that happened right there in open court. By the time that day was over, Mercer wasn't walking out with his badge anymore. He was being dragged out in handcuffs, and half the people who used to laugh at his jokes suddenly couldn't remember ever knowing him. But the strange thing is, even now, people still argue about it. Was Elena defending herself, or did she cross a line the moment she fought back? And if you've ever seen how power gets abused in quiet places, like courtrooms, you probably already know why that question makes people uncomfortable. See, the courthouse in Charleston where all this happened wasn't some modern glass building. It was one of those old Southern courthouses with creaky floors, tall windows, and walls that have seen more quiet injustice than anyone wants to admit. The kind of place where reputations carry more weight than facts sometimes. Elena Ward walked through those doors wearing her navy dress whites, calm, steady metals catching the morning light, and you could feel the room notice her before anyone said a word. 22 years in the Navy, 3 deployments, Silver Star, Bronze Star, not the kind of person you mistake for fragile. But Mercer looked at her and saw something else entirely. To him, she wasn't a decorated officer, she was a challenge. A black woman walking into a space where he thought he controlled the rules. And men like Mercer, they don't handle that well. Elena wasn't there for herself, though. She was there for a kid named Marcus Bell, someone she'd mentored since he was a teenager running track in the same neighborhood she grew up in. Marcus had just enlisted in the Navy a few weeks earlier, trying to get out of the cycle that traps a lot of kids in places like that. You know what I mean. But right before he shipped out, Mercer and a few deputies picked him up during what they called a street sweep. Said they found drugs under his car seat. Funny thing about that, though. The street camera from a nearby warehouse showed Mercer leaning into Marcus's car and dropping the bag himself before pulling him out and slamming him on the pavement. Real clean work if nobody checked the footage. So Elena came to court to support Marcus just to make sure the truth had somebody standing next to it. She walked in, sat down in the front row, folded her hands, and kept quiet. Mercer saw her and immediately started running his mouth, leaning against the clerk's desk like the whole room belonged to him. "Look at that," he muttered, loud enough for half the gallery to hear. The Navy must be getting desperate if they're letting people like her wear medals. One of the bailiffs looked uncomfortable. A couple folks lowered their eyes, but Mercer kept going. "You in the wrong place, Commander," he said when he stepped closer. "This isn't the battlefield. Around here, the badge decides who's right." Elena looked up at him slowly, calm as a lake at sunrise. "I've dealt with insurgent commanders with more discipline than you," she said quietly, and at least they knew when they sounded foolish. A couple people laughed before they could stop themselves, and Mercer's face went tight right away, because bullies hate it when the room stops laughing with them. Court started a few minutes later, and Mercer got on the stand acting like he was the most honest man in the city. Said Marcus resisted arrest. Said he reached under the seat like he might grab a weapon. Same story deputies have used for years, the kind that usually works because people assume the badge means truth. But Marcus's lawyer had the camera footage ready, and when cross-examination began, the air in that room shifted. Mercer started stumbling over details, snapping at questions, trying to talk over the attorney. Then he glanced toward Elena and said, "Of course she's backing him up. People from the same neighborhoods always cover for each other." Judge Miriam Holloway leaned forward right then, eyes sharp as broken glass. "Deputy Mercer," she said slowly, "you're about one careless sentence away from contempt of court." Mercer mumbled something about military bias, but the damage was already done. You could see the cracks forming. During recess, the judge stepped into chambers, the bailiffs moved into the hall, and the courtroom relaxed in that dangerous way public spaces do when authority leaves the room for a minute. Marcus was whispering with his lawyer at the defense table when Elena stood up to stretch her back. That's when Mercer came down from the stand and walked straight toward her. Not casually either. Shoulders stiff, jaw clenched, like someone who'd been embarrassed in front of the wrong audience. "You think you're smart," he said, stopping inches from her face. "You think you can come in here and make me look like a liar." Elena folded her hands in front of her uniform jacket. "You managed that without my help." His eyes flared. That kid needed to learn respect. "No," Elena replied, voice quiet but steady. "He needed someone to stop abusing their power." That's when Mercer lost control. You could feel it coming. That moment when pride turns into rage because someone refuses to be intimidated. He lunged forward and grabbed for her throat, yelling, "Know your place." Now here's the thing about Elena Ward. She spent 2 decades training in places where hesitation gets people killed. The second Mercer moved, she moved faster. One hand knocked his arm offline, the other caught his wrist, and she stepped into the space behind his shoulder with the kind of precision that comes from muscle memory. Mercer's elbow locked twisted, and suddenly the biggest man in the room was bent over the defense table with his arms screaming in pain. The crack when the joint gave way echoed through the courtroom like someone snapping a wooden stick. Papers scattered everywhere, chairs scraped across the floor. Someone gasped, and Elena held him there with one steady hand on his back. Her breathing hadn't even changed. "Deputy Mercer," she whispered near his ear, "calm as winter frost, you just assaulted a commissioned officer of the United States Navy in a courtroom." Mercer howled and tried to twist free. "She attacked me. Somebody help." His partner reached toward his holster out of instinct, and that's when Judge Holloway's voice cut across the room like thunder. "Take your hand off that weapon immediately." The judge had come back early and seen enough. Elena released Mercer the second she was ordered to step back, smoothed her jacket, and stood at attention while Mercer staggered upright, clutching his useless arm. Holloway studied him for a long moment, disappointment written all over her face. "Deputy Ron Mercer," she said slowly, "you have just committed felony assault in my courtroom." She turned to the bailiffs. "Take him into custody." For a second, Mercer looked like he couldn't process what he was hearing. The same men he drank coffee with every morning walked toward him with handcuffs. His partner stared at the floor. Nobody defended him. Then the doors opened again, and 2 federal investigators stepped inside along with a Naval Criminal Intelligence agent. Turns out Mercer had been under investigation for months. That street sweep that caught Marcus wasn't random at all. It was part of a pattern. Families in the Ashbury district had been getting pressured to sell their homes after a development company started buying up nearby property. Anyone who resisted suddenly found themselves dealing with code violations, traffic stops, arrests. And Mercer was the one enforcing it. The twist nobody expected was how high the trail went, because the development group had quiet backing from a city councilman named Daniel Rourke, a polished politician who liked talking about urban revitalization while quietly pushing people off land their families had owned for generations. Word spread fast, and by the time Elena stepped outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters had already gathered on the steps. The deputy's union rep was there too, loudly claiming Mercer was a hero who'd been attacked by an unstable military officer. Cameras were pointed everywhere. Elena walked down those steps slowly, calm as ever, and stepped up to the microphones. "My name is Commander Elena Ward," she began, voice steady enough that the whole crowd quieted down. "Today, a deputy sheriff assaulted me in a courtroom because he didn't like the evidence exposing his lies." The union rep scoffed and said, "You got proof of that." Elena nodded toward the investigators behind her. A screen flickered to life against the courthouse wall, and the warehouse camera footage started playing. There was Mercer planting the drugs in Marcus's car before shouting that he'd found evidence. The crowd gasped all at once. Even a few deputies standing behind the barricades lowered their heads. Then Elena took one more step forward. This wasn't about one arrest, she said. It was about clearing residents out of a neighborhood so a development project could move forward. Right on cue, Councilman Daniel Rourke himself pushed through the reporters, smiling that polished politician's smile. "Commander Ward has served her country honorably," he said smoothly, "but stress from combat service can cause misunderstandings." Elena looked at him like he'd just told a bad joke. Then she held up a flash drive. "This contains call records between your office and Deputy Mercer discussing property acquisition in the Ashbury district." The smile vanished from Rourke's face in an instant. Federal agents moved in, and suddenly the man who had spent years controlling the narrative found himself standing in handcuffs while cameras flashed. Now, most stories would end there with the courtroom victory, but life isn't that tidy. Later that night, while Elena and Marcus were at a federal field office reviewing statements, the power suddenly cut out. Emergency lights washed the hallway red, and somewhere a heavy door clicked shut. Elena's instincts kicked in instantly. She pushed Marcus behind a steel desk and whispered, "Stay down." Moments later, 2 armed contractors slipped through the doorway wearing night vision gear, hired professionals, not cops. Someone had decided that if the courtroom plan failed, the witnesses needed to disappear. Elena grabbed a tactical strobe from a nearby evidence shelf and triggered it the moment they stepped fully into the room. The flash blinded their goggles instantly. She moved like a shadow, disarming the first man, driving him into the floor, then locking the second into a chokehold until he went limp. By the time federal agents stormed in minutes later, both attackers were unconscious. The patches on their sleeves traced back to a private security firm used by Rourke's office. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed again for sentencing. Mercer walked in wearing prison khaki and a medical brace that kept his arm locked at a right angle, nerve damage permanent. Rourke followed no expensive suit this time, just another defendant waiting to hear his fate. Marcus spoke first, voice steady, as he told the judge how close he came to losing everything because someone with power decided his life was expendable. Elena spoke next, reminding the court that authority means nothing without accountability. Judge Holloway didn't hesitate. Mercer received 24 years in federal prison for civil rights violations, assault, and conspiracy. Rourke received 17 years in forfeiture of the development funds tied to the scheme, money redirected into rebuilding the very neighborhood they tried to dismantle. A year later, Marcus stood on the parade grounds at Officer Candidate School wearing his own uniform, now shoulders squared and future wide open. Elena met him afterward near the water and straightened the collar on his dress jacket. "You ready for what comes next?" she asked. Marcus grinned and said, "After everything we've seen, yeah, I think I am." And maybe that's the real ending to this story. Not the fall of a corrupt deputy or a crooked politician, but the fact that someone who was almost crushed by that system got back up and walked right through it. Still, people argue about that moment in the courtroom. Some say Elena should have stepped back and let the law handle Mercer. Others say the law had been asleep for years and she just woke it up. What do you think? Was Elena right to fight back the second he grabbed her? Or should she have trusted the system to catch up eventually? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you've ever witnessed someone stand up to power like that in real life, tell the story. I'd like to hear it.